ask you a sidebar issue, your worship, the
Sure.
Repsol, the
Sure.
potential expansion. I guess they're coming to meet with their city liaison people today. It seems pretty ambitious. It's like 5 times the original cost of the facility. Is it necessary? Would you support it?
Look, it is pretty ambitious. We have a real deficit of sport and recreation infrastructure throughout the city. So of course we'll have to look at it on par with everything else. Now the thing is, we've done our capital plans already. So to find the money for this would require finding new money somewhere. Similar situation with the Vivo Centre in the North Central Calgary, who have big expansion plans on the books as well. You know, we don't have the money for all of this. As we're building our 4 new rec facilities, still 2 of them under construction, in Northwest and Southeast Calgary, we got to make some decisions. But I'm happy to have everyone come with their proposals, and the city can figure out where the smartest place to allocate our limited funds would be.
I mean, it's a facility that's used by 1.5 million people. It's quite a utilization.
Oh, it's huge, but so is Vivo, and I anticipate that the Seton and Rocky Ridge facilities will be used by as many. Village Square is bursting at the seams. The Genesis Center is bursting at the seams. Southland is bursting at the seams. So there's a lot of things we have to do, and you know, certainly this council has invested more money in recreation facilities than probably ever in history in building the 4 new ones, and it's a job that'll never end.
So on the golf course front, you go from maybe writing letters and now reviewing and studying golf courses across the city.
The notice of motion that was put before council today was very problematic because it really talked about a subsidy for one particular use without really, frankly, a very good rationale or any numbers behind it. So there's no way I could have supported it. The question of what's the future of golf within the city is actually a good one, because there are some uses that don't make sense inside the city. There are some that do make sense. There's the relationship between the public golf courses and the private ones. You know, if something came back and said, you know, maybe we defer some portion of the property taxes until the land is sold, that might be something I might be able to get my head around. But I find it odd that members of council who call themselves very fiscally conservative were looking for something that is a straight up subsidy to one private business type and not to others, and I find that challenging.
So you don't buy the argument that it wasn't a subsidy, it's just because they are already taxed on
It's 1,000% a subsidy. There's no question. You can't spin that. You know, as I said in council, we have public rec centers. So why doesn't every Good Life Fitness come to me and say, well, we're providing a public good, please give us a subsidy as well?
Given the numbers involved, you don't seem convinced that that's going to be the reason that every private golf course will be out of business in 10 years.
Well, what was pretty surprising is that there were no numbers in the notice of motion. There was no analysis. And when we heard from administration that we're looking at maybe $100,000 for each golf course, yeah, it's a big number. It's big taxes. But if that $100,000 is going to prevent them from selling their land for tens of millions of dollars to a developer, I'm having trouble following that argument.
What about the Green Line expenditures? Are you surprised the number's over $100 million already?
It includes land, right? So we're starting to assemble the land, which is a non-trivial thing for such an incredibly large project. And we continue to move forward. We're serious about it, and we're going to continue to move forward to build this thing. And we got to get the rest of the funding in place.
Have there been any hiccups in acquiring the land, or are people willing to sell?
Not that I'm aware of. It's a process. It's always a process, and it seems to be going pretty smoothly.
How is
Sweden was good. It was a very, very interesting trip. I've never been on an official government visit before. And certainly there was glittering balls with the Queen and the princesses, and me wearing white tie and tails, which I've never done before. But there was a little more to it than that. And I was actually really interested in 2 things in particular. One is, this was the first official Canadian government visit since the passage of a comprehensive trade agreement between Canada and Europe by the European Parliament. And so Sweden was a big proponent of CETA, and there's a real opportunity for us to talk about how CETA can help us each grow our economies, especially in the area of public procurement. So procurement is part of CETA, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has always been very nervous about opening up our procurement to all these European companies. But now that it's happened, we need those companies to bid. And so I had some good conversations with people in cities like Stockholm about how do you encourage foreign bidders to come and bid on your stuff to create competition and to reduce prices. So I think that's a really important thing that all Canadian municipalities need to work on. The second is, of course, there were lots of individual business contacts. So for example, I've learned that Volvo is doing really interesting work on both electric and natural gas buses. And as we are converting our fleets, our transit fleet, that technology is very interesting to us. And then finally, the reason that I was invited in particular on this trip was to be able to talk about pluralism and diversity in our cities and how that relates to Sweden. And I was reminded when we were in the city of Malmo of all of those pictures of the central station in Malmo where refugees would arrive overnight over the course of 2015 and the local people weren't quite sure what to do. So they did what they should have done. They brought sandwiches and bus tickets and bus maps and helped people figure out what their next steps were. And to me, that was not just a very Swedish reaction, but a very Canadian reaction. And one of the things that I heard over and over and over again in Sweden is that Swedish, that Canadian perspective on how we see ourselves as human beings in the world is really at risk. And we need to maintain our status as beacons of hope and light. Ready.
We were talking about public hearings, kind of joking around about it and saying that maybe we should have those meetings every time we have council.
Yeah, I just thought of it. So let's see what council has to think about it. But it is interesting, right? Because particularly this year, we've had 2 3-day public hearings and then very short regular meetings of council. Maybe there's a way to spread the work better for future councils.
So how would that work? Do you have to present to council? What's the process for that?
The former legislative governance task force, now incorporated into the PFC, Priorities and Finance Committee, is looking at a number of mechanisms to increase the efficiency of council meetings. So here's another idea to throw at the wall and see if it sticks.
You mentioned a replacement for Diane Collier. Has anyone expressed an interest in securing that?
Yeah, there's a few members of council who have expressed a slight interest. So what we'll do is we'll go in the back. Everyone will make a little speech about why they want to do it, have a ballot, and that should be relatively quick. Ms. Woolley, as council directed her to do, actually did a very thoughtful analysis on what are the limits of council's speech in relation to one another. And so what she is suggesting is that we do not adopt any code of conduct for councillor behavior during election campaigns, which is what she had been asked to do. But she reminds us that she is working on a new and revised ethical guidelines document or code of conduct for council. And she had some suggestions, though that's not what we voted on today, about language that's used in other codes of conduct, words like abuse, bully, or intimidate, so that councillors may not abuse, bully, or intimidate other councillors. And we had a really thoughtful discussion with her about what those words means and what the limits of free expression on public officials ought to be.
Is that strictly in the context of an election campaign?
No, that was her whole
general
point, is that rather than have a separate code of conduct for election campaigns, we should have a more broad use. Right now, the code of conduct suggests that councillors must exercise free speech responsibly, and she's always felt that that's not very specific, and we should use some language that better allows people who are adjudicating such things, herself and the Integrity Commissioner, to be able to have some more specific language on it.
Was that triggered by a complaint about something somebody had said?
No, it's always been part of the work plan of the ethics advisor to craft a new code of conduct, because quite frankly, the one that I made council pass, because we didn't have one before, probably could have used some bigger brains on it, and she has a big brain.
How does it differ from the previous work that said, while before a campaign is underway, you don't go into this work because you are changing the word boundaries?
That's very specifically around councillors' election behavior. What she was asked to do on this one, if you recall, by Councillor Stevenson, was specifically talk about what councillors can say about each other during an election campaign. I thought it was sort of a strange thing to do, but it ended up in actually a good, thoughtful discussion, I think.
Why the decision not to replace
We were missing 2 members of council, and we were deadlocked.
Is there anything particular you're going to be looking at for the next member of the commission?
We just need someone who is thoughtful, responsible, who's willing to engage with a lot of the big issues in front of the commission right now. Quite frankly, I made it sound much more dramatic than it was. We were missing 2 members of council, and you have to get a certain number of votes in order to be appointed. So we're just going to deal when we got our full council next week.
How many councillors are interested in filling the position?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say because that was in camera. There was a heated contest many are interested in doing it.
Do you know why that's in camera? It seems like a debate that maybe the public, talking about police transparency, would want to hear.
It wasn't much of a debate, frankly. It took 4 minutes because it's just the balloting, and we always do the balloting of our appointments in camera. So we have a secret ballot.
So if that took 4 minutes, and then other discussions took however long they took, why did you guys stay in camera that long?
It's such a nice room.
Will we learn more about
There
this?
are massage chairs,
I'm gonna,
pedicures,
And
This
the
is all on
Italian
the record.
tile.
Italian tile,
this is all on the record.
wood-painted vinyl. We just had a bunch of stuff to talk about. Because it was such a short agenda, we thought we would move some of the strategic discussion that will be continuing next week and have some time while we were all in the room today.
Strategic on what?
Lots of big stuff, budgets, money, stuff
Shouldn't you
like
have
that.
done that at the beginning of the agenda when you set the agenda?
No, it was always on there. That was always some of the topics. So. Anyway, okay.
Will we learn about the major projects list at the end of next week's budget meeting, or is it long term?
Both.
That's exciting.
Next week, the infrastructure Calgary work that we've been doing, which is all around freeing up budget money to spend on our priorities. Council's going to get a first draft of what projects how much money we've been able to free up and what projects we might want to advance in our queue. So depending on Council's decision next week, if they choose to approve some projects, of course, that'll all be in public. If they think more work needs to be done, then more work will need to be done.